Well, moving on now. Today, February 21st, marks International Mother Language Day, a celebration of cultural and linguistic diversity worldwide. Well, it is the 25th anniversary of the observance this year. The UNESCO, which is one of the major actors working to preserve and protect the world's estimated 7,000 different mother tongues. And it's a crucial time to carry out this essential effort, as 90% of these languages are used by less than 100,000 people, and as many as 1,500 of them could disappear by the end of the century. For more on the stakes, then, Manos Antoninis joins me on set. He is the director of the Global Education Monitoring Report at UNESCO. Manos, thank you very much for joining us today. So I would like to start with this idea of disappearing languages. It's been said that every 2 weeks a language dies. In what regions of the world are they most threatened with disappearance, and what precisely is driving that dynamic?
Well, today, of course, we're celebrating the 7,000 languages that are spoken around the world, but from an education perspective, let's not forget it is only 350 languages that are being used in education. And that's, of course, one of the major threats to languages. When you're not being taught in the language you speak at home, then, of course, it is very difficult to see these languages surviving in a world today where there is so much communication in only a small group of languages. Technology can be a major help, but it can also be a major threat to the survival of languages.
Well, as you suggested there, then, an estimated 40% of the population doesn't have access to education in a language that they speak or understand. Aside from how that, kind of cyclically contributes to the disappearance of languages, what are some of the other consequences of that?
Well, the major problem here is that we know that globally, only about 7 in 10 children in low and middle income countries achieve what we call a minimum level of proficiency in reading by the end of primary school. And the fact that they're not being taught in the language they speak at home is perhaps the number one reason, education at least reason, that plays a role in that state of the world. We know that science has proven time and again that when you are being taught in your home language, you're far more likely to learn. And yet, as things stand now, languages are being introduced by countries in Asia, and particularly in Africa, which faces the largest extent of challenges in that area. And yet, these policies are not really being implemented.
So you say in listening to you, I'm wondering, one would think that it's relatively easy to print educational material in all of the languages of the world, really, especially given some of the progress that we've seen in technology in recent decades. What is preventing that from happening?
Well, there are many challenges. In fact, resources is a major issue. It's not as easy to print textbooks, to prepare them and print them and make them relevant for the linguistic community that would benefit from them. It takes a lot of efforts. Let's not forget, even major languages spoken by millions of people sometimes do not even have a proper way of writing them that is understood by the speakers themselves. But on top of that, it is an issue of mentality primarily. Teachers have been in the world's poorer countries used to teaching in English or in French or in Portuguese. They find it very difficult to accept teaching in another language. You have to, of course, take into account the fact that populations are spread. It's not so easy to find just speakers of one language in one place. People are getting increasingly mixed up, and that makes it also difficult. And ultimately, it is a matter of the mentality of the decision makers who face pressures from the communities. Communities in disadvantaged parts of the world feel that it is a ticket to the outside world to be taught in English or in French or in Portuguese. They forget that actually, if only their children could learn their home language first, it would make the learning of the other languages much easier. That has not really trickled down. People still think they're being excluded if they're served an education in their home language. And that's where the decision makers really need to be very forward-looking to ensure that children ensure that they have the right to being taught in the home language.
So with the summit that was recently held here in Paris, artificial intelligence obviously comes to mind. You mentioned technology earlier. Do you think that it is a tool that could or should be used to advance the cause of protecting lesser known or endangered languages? And concretely, how might that work?
Well, generally, technology is a double-edged sword. It can, of course, increase drastically the potential of making people, first of all, feel proud about the language. Sometimes, as I mentioned, people feel that it's not the right thing to do to speak their home language because they're used to seeing influential people speaking another language. Seeing them, of course, on use on the internet as it is increasingly possible can be a game changer. Also, changing the culture of writing, sending text messages in your home language is also a good entry point. But in practice, what we see is that the major languages, the dominant languages, are really overpowering, and most of the resources available become increasingly available in them. And that continues being a disadvantage and, of course, puts many people off from making the extra effort that is needed. Let's not forget, I mentioned, even preparing simple textbooks is a major investment. It requires a big commitment from governments to really protect these languages.
As a final question for you, sir, language is obviously a source of cultural wealth, but some of the most endangered languages, again, as you said, are in poorer parts of the world where material considerations are primordial. How can we reconcile these two things, protecting rare languages while also allowing those who speak them to integrate into and better benefit from the world economy?
Well, it is a matter, first of all, of dignity. So it is the rights of people. So that needs to be taken into account. There are mechanisms that have intercultural bilingual education in Latin America, where there has been an effort to make the languages communicate. It's not as if one is taking over the other, but one recognizes the beauty and the richness and the culture of the other. However, let's not forget, if measures are not being taken very soon, especially in Africa, we might see many more languages being at threat of disappearing, even when they're currently spoken by millions of people. So a major change in the mindset of decision makers is required now if Africa, at the end of the day, people talk about decolonialization. So it has to start with the language of instruction policies.
Manos Antoninis of UNESCO, thank you so very much for coming on the show today.